Okay, I am going to begin our class. So today, actually, I have three case studies for everyone to review. We're going to go through a low income level, or let's say not low, but a modest income level, an upper income level, and a highest income level that most people would deal with. Now, Roth conversions are a little tricky because most people think you're going to always save money on doing a Roth conversion. They're not. There are many balls moving in the analysis of what's happening. You have Medicare tiers affecting you, not only just tax brackets. Your Medicare tiers affecting you, taxation brackets, medical surcharge from the Obama healthcare tax. So there's multiple things that could be happening that can affect what goes on, and of course, understanding what the tax might be to your heirs, your children. They're affluent children, they're going to be in the highest tax bracket. If they're in a high tax state, it's even higher. So even if you actually lose money net worth-wise by doing the conversion, at the end of the day, the net to heirs after taxes might be better by doing the conversion. So there are a lot of things we want to look at. And I'm going to start with a very simplistic analysis, just for a quick analysis here. Let's pretend I had $500,000. And I'm in the 30% tax bracket now. And I'm at the 30% tax bracket. Obviously, there's no 30% tax bracket. Let's just say overall federal and state, it's 30%. If I convert $500,000 today, I'd net $350,000. If I grow both these piles by 5%, and at the end here, I didn't convert, and I pay the 30% taxes, I'd have $542. Would be the same amount as the Roth conversion. To really make a Roth conversion succeed, you need to have a disparity. So, for example, if I can get my tax rate down now to 20%, but my heirs would be 30%. Now you can see I have a positive gain. Conversely, if I'm 30% and 20% later, a Roth conversion would make no sense, except for one caveat. And we'll talk about that in a second. If I'm at 28%, I'm at a loss. Right? I'm 30% now, maybe 28% later. But here's the thing. Later, I don't know what the tax bracket's going to be. It may actually be higher than what we currently think it is. Secondly, by creating the Roth dollars, these dollars are now free to take large capital calls where this isn't. So I don't have the luxury of liquidity that I with this that I do with this. So it might be worth taking a loss. Keep that in mind, and I want to just kind of give an overview so people get an idea that it's not as simple as it can look. Even when you look at it at a simple level, it's not quite as simple as you think. But the goal is always to try to get taxed at a lower net level now than I would be at later years. All right, that's it. We'll start with the first case. First case is a modest client. You can see they have about $800,000 of assets, and they have a desired income level of about $5,500. With taxes, it's about $6,500. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Jumped on you. Let me go back. Sorry, my screen is loading slow. Okay, so I have a desire. I'm going to need about $6,500. This client's not in a big tax exposure situation. They're not in a large tax bracket. So what did we do? And let's look at what's going on. So I'm going to have an analysis here. And I'm going to uncheck my solution for the time being. And I want to look at my client's income taxes. I want to do that. I'm going to scroll all the way to the right. I'm going to see my client is in a relatively low tax bracket until what? RNBs kick in. Once their RNBs kick in, it's going to jump into the 22% bracket, a 12% bracket, and they'll be in the 12% bracket the rest of their lives. Not a bad position at all. All right? One of the things we want to look at, though, is this. What are we passing to our heirs? Are we passing qualified dollars to my heirs? Because here's the problem. This client's going to pass right now more than $300,000 in qualified dollars to their kids. And at a tax rate of 35% to the kids, just imagine their kids are working, they're in the 22% bracket, and they live in New Jersey or California or wherever, and they may pay 7%, 8% taxes, that's 30% minimum. They lump sum it, that's the lowest bracket. They'll go from 30 to 40 real quick, adding that much money onto their pile of taxable income. So they may face as much as 35% in taxation. Maybe a little lower, maybe a little higher, I don't know. But we want to kind of get that down, by the way, when we do a Roth conversion. Very, very important to get an understanding of where the kids' inheritance are, because that's part of the protection of the Roth. A child or children would rather receive Roth dollars than qualified dollars. They have a value too, and we want to track that value. That said, let's check our solution, and let's talk about what we did. Now, doing a Roth conversion in the application is pretty simple. By the way, there's no solution here buying income or testing Social Security. I'm trying to keep apples to apples. All the rates of returns are the same in all of the investments, whether it's Roth, qualified, or non-qualified dollars. All no difference. So I want to give an apple-to-apple situation. Now, to do a Roth conversion, you just simply can click on that, and over here on the right-hand side, you'll see the bracket and the dollars to the bracket. Now, when a client is in the 12% or 10% bracket, whatever dollar number you see here is generally the dollars to the end of that bracket. So if it says there's $20,000 there, you can put $20,000 in, especially if you're taking from non-qualified dollars first. Because if you take from non-qualified dollars first, in other words, what I mean, if you convert $20,000, you can afford that capacity. You're not, if you trigger income taxes, which you will, on that $20,000, but pay the taxes with your non-qualified dollars. Well, those non-qualified dollars, when liquidated to pay the tax, you're in the lowest tax bracket. They won't be subject to capital gains if they're equity assets. If they're fixed assets, of course, there's just return to basis. So when we're in the 12 to 10% brackets, converting doesn't cost dollars if you use non-qualified to pay your taxes. And that's what we try to do, by the way. We want it always under the field here, it says excess cash flow. You will see a field that says distribution. We want to use the qualified dollars last when we're doing conversion and non-qualified first. That allows us to use tax-free dollars up front to cover the conversion. Ideally, once I converted everything, I won't have qualified dollars at the end anyhow. That said, let's look at the results of this. Oh, sorry about that. Let me get my screen. It's a little out of whack here.
Hey, Robert, I had somebody raising their hand here. Give me a second. I'm going to check in with Scott Foster, see if he had a question.
Okay.
Scott, are you there? It looks like you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I did, and then I just thought maybe I should just wait and see if it's answered rather than ask questions too early.
Okay. Do you want to pause then, or do you have a question?
Yeah. No, I'm good.
I'll let you
Okay.
pause. And then we had Gail. Gail had a question. Says, what if a client doesn't have non-qualified dollars to pay taxes? Robert, do you want to just quickly answer that?
Sure. No, it's not a problem, but understand if they have all total qualified dollars, and it says you're $20,000 left in the bracket. So understand what that means. I'm going to convert. That's $20,000 now at the amount of taxes you're paying now. If I liquidate $20,000 more in qualified dollars, I've got to come up with the taxes to pay that, which is say $5,000. Well, in that case, more like 25. It'll be more like $3,000, but it's say $3,000 more I have to come up with. Well, now that $3,000 more in taxes have to come from some other source, which will be my qualified dollars. You get what we call circular computation. So now I have to liquidate $3,000 more from my qualified dollars to cover the taxes. So if I'm liquidating 20, now I'm going to have to liquidate 23 to cover the taxes.
All right, she's got it. Thanks.
So that's why you can't trust that number if they're qualified. You're going to have to go under it. If it says $20,000, you probably have to do about 17 so you can cover their taxes. Okay? Now, on this first case, I'm going to just walk you through this. There are sweet spots in conversions. So let's look at right now, everything's the same. And I'm going to click off one at a time and watch what starts happening. On the first one, I've improved their situation by a meager $7,000. On the second one, I've improved it by $35,000. It has nothing to do that this is the second year. It's actually the first one. So if I uncheck that one and it's now the second year, I drop back down to $7,000, roughly around $7,000. As you convert, you're changing the mechanics down the road of dollars to access. You're changing the amount of R&Ds. You're doing all kinds of things that affect further down the road. So some conversions add way more than others. Even though these are about the same amount of dollars, I'm getting bigger, sometimes big changes. I'm up to 59,000 on the third change. On the fourth, I'm over 60. On the fifth, I've dropped down to 56,000. There is a point of diminishing returns on conversions. They have to do with all kinds of factors, and the fact that as I'm doing these conversions early up, I'm getting taxed. And what I'm doing is I'm taking the tax now instead of later. But you know what? Later on, if I'm in a low bracket anyhow, the harm isn't that great. Not only that, now you can look at this point. I no longer have qualified dollars. I've gotten rid of all the qualified dollars to my heirs. So future conversions aren't necessary. My kids aren't going to get any more qualified. So there's not necessarily a further enhancement of continuing doing a Roth conversion. And in fact, if I do the last one, I fall down to 49,000.
So Robert, if I can interject, a couple things. I think we perceive that we possibly could be in the absolute lowest tax bracket for average and higher income earners in the future today, based on where we're going to be in the future. So there's a perceived advantage to taking advantage of that, especially now while we're in what's perceived to be very low tax environments. Secondly, even if I gain no dollars, but I create tax-free, liquidable dollars for later. So if it's all in pre-tax and it's perceived I don't need it, and I've got $200,000 or $300,000 sitting over there. However, if for no gain I can get it to Roth and be in the same spot, now I've got $200,000 or $300,000 that if I did have an emergency, that I could get it and trigger no major catastrophe to a tax bracket by getting capacity to that liquidable dollar amount. There's a very big advantage to being able to have that block of capital where I could get to it at any time as liquidable assets without triggering a tax upset in a future date. So even if I gain nothing in that bottom line, as long as it's not costing me something, I'm still better off getting those dollars to Roth, even if there's not a net sum game.
Thank you, Curtis, for stealing my thunder. I was exactly. So the point here is, even though I have diminished returns here, as Curtis just pointed out, I'd still do those conversions, because getting to having a surplus number isn't necessarily the limiting factor. If at the end of the day, I actually have more dollars sitting free, liquid for a large capital call that I can take at any time, or I can pass on Roth dollars. My kids don't have to drain right away, and they can also get advantage of a tax deferred situation. Or, as Curtis pointed out, which more importantly, we're in very low tax brackets historically. So the latter years in this equation may be taxed at much higher rates than we're showing here. So this column here may get taxed at a higher rate than I'm doing. So that's an important function to keep in mind. Not only for this case I've just showed you, I'm going to go through 3 cases. These are important qualifications. Our goal is not necessarily to get more dollars. If we do, that's great. Our goal is really to create a new pile of dollars that they can have for other purposes.
So Robert, a couple questions real quick. I think I can answer these. Scott Foster asked, would it make sense, if necessary, to take a HELOC withdrawal or a HECM withdrawal to pay the tax if there's no non-qualified assets? Certainly there would be some fact patterns where in fact that could make sense. And the scenarios would be pretty broad and would take away from our time to get to the conclusion of what we prepared. So the answer to that, certainly in certain fact patterns, Scott, the answer is yes. Then Gail asked, what are your thoughts, or how would you perform if the conversion triggers Medicare surcharge tax. And again, you got to worry about on low-income taxpayers doing Roth conversions in a low bracket. You have to be careful that you're not also triggering a higher portion of the Social Security to be taxed. That's at the low end of the spectrum. And certainly at the high end of the spectrum, another gauge you got to look at is that you're not triggering that Medicare surcharge. So those become additional components one has to be fearful of and have to consider when doing these conversions. And then finally, Scott asked again, is the lower discretionary liquid assets due to the 5-year rule? Scott, raise your hand and let me, I don't understand your question, so maybe you can raise your hand and I can let you talk here. Hold on. Scott, clarify your question, please.
Yeah, so I just noticed on the chart above that with the Roth conversions happening, that all of a sudden the green line, the solution line, has dropped as far as discretionary liquid assets. And so what I was asking was, is that because when you if you're just establishing a Roth for the first time, you've got to wait 5 years before you can take withdrawals?
No.
Is that what's being, without triggering other issues?
Let me explain that. First of all, in this case particular, the Roth dollars are not being touched anyhow, so they're behind, and I'm not looking at the penalty issues here. The reason you see this, and you were a little faster than I could explain. One of the things that happened with the Roth conversion, let's look at this graphically. When I do those Roth conversions, let's look at your investment net worth. It goes down, right? Now, the reason it's going down is because I'm capturing the taxation. In real net dollars to my heirs, I'm probably ahead. But in total abstract dollars, just actual dollars I'm looking at, not taking the tax in effect, I'm going to have fewer dollars, right? That affects effectively my withdrawal rate, right? Because if I need $60,000 a year and I've got $1 million versus $800,000 as a percentage of my overall assets, my withdrawal rate's going to be greater, right? I mean, it's a little deceptive. Second thing, there's a cost, obviously. When I did this Roth conversion, you see my withdrawal rate is higher in these up years. This discussion, by the way, we're talking about Roth conversions and Roth conversions only, not how to start mitigating the risks we take by creating high distribution rates in the early years, or how I would fund those. Like someone just mentioned, would I use a HELOC? I could use a HELOC. I could use, if I have a fully funded life insurance policy, that's another method. Take from that and pay back later. There are other methods of getting the dollars to fund the cost. I'm not here to talk about how we fund it in this class today. This is basically a giant overview of what's the advantage. Now, we may need to mitigate this, right? We may come here and say, I'm going to have to say a 5-year period certain bucket, or I'm going to have to do a ladder of CDs or something, so that because my withdrawal rate may be getting a little high here. Again, and that, by the way, because my withdrawal rate is higher here, I have less discretionary liquid assets. That's what that comes from.
I'm going to make a comment, and then we're going to move on so you can get through your material. And I may pause for a while here before I take more questions, just so Robert can get through his material. I just wanted to indicate to you, Scott, and everybody on the call, since he's just trying to focus narrowly on the discussion of how to use the Roth conversion wizard today and how to optimize, as soon as we see these other problems, there are lots of ways to mitigate that additional withdrawal risk and discretionary liquidity, which we're not going to focus on today. We're going to talk about building a bridge for Social Security and other strategies, and that's going to be our next call. We'll schedule for our next event. And it's interesting. We just recently had a case where we did one thing that created a spike early, and we wanted to bring that spike of withdrawal risk back down, and we were looking at a 7-year bridge. Well, interestingly enough, we went out and looked at a level bridge, we looked at a COLA bridge, and we looked at the best in class that we could get. But when we went out and looked at what's the present value over those 7 years that needed to be available, and we had qualified dollars to work with, what we found is a combination of laddered CDs and MIGA contracts that matured at precisely the right time, a year in advance of the cash flows that were needed to keep pace with that COLA increase of cash flows with pre-tax dollars. We were able to shrink a $300,000 purchase for a 7-year bridge by $15,000 of a discount by simply looking at ladders of CDs and MIGAs combined. as opposed to just doing a SPIA contract for a 7-year COLA adjusted payout. So we're in an interesting interest rate time where it's not as easy as just looking to buy the bridge. Maybe you got to get a little creative, and just there's endless ways to optimize these cash flows and having the right dollars that make that discretionary liquidity better and bring down the withdrawal risk. So with that, Robert, I'll turn it back.
Okay, so hopefully that answered the question why you see the anomaly in this is simply because I have less discretionary assets because I need to withdraw more dollars to pay the taxes, and because of doing that, I'm creating a higher withdrawal rate, which creates a lower discretionary environment. All right, let's go to case 2 now. Okay, let's go and open up Bob. So Bob, let's get Bob showing you here. Get my screen. Show charts. Okay. All right. So Bob here, Bob's asking a little bit more. Bob is now up to $17,000. That's what he needs going out the gate. He wants 12 and needs about 17 when he got it. Bob's got some Social Security. Bob has a small pension. Bob has about $3 million evenly split between qualified and non-qualified. By the way, I'm going to sidetrack here. The answer before about the Medicare surcharge tax, which is 0.9% on qualified dollars and 3.8% on non-qualified dollars. We're tracking that, and we'll tax you for those surcharges. So you got to keep that in mind. But we'll do that automatically, so don't go nuts on that. Just look at your bracket. It's probably more important. Now, that said, this client, again, the client is pretty decent shape. And I'm not going to propose a solution, what I would do to make life better or not. This is, again, not the purpose of this. Purpose is I'm going to go to analysis. Again, the same situation. I'm going to go to the test Roth conversion. And you'll see over here your brackets again. And this time now, I'm taking advantage of the 22% bracket. And I'm keeping my client in the 22% bracket. One of the things you should do, by the way, before you go and analyze what you want to do, is look at your income statement. And the reason I say that is we want to look at the income statement on the baseline and come over here all the way to the end and look at what the bracket I'm going to be in. So I can see my client is going to be in the 24% bracket to start with. And why? They're taking all qualified dollars to fund their shortfall initially. And when they do that, they may not want it, but want to get rid of those qualified dollars. We don't want to pass them to the heirs. And by the way, getting taxed at the 24% bracket, except for the Medicare surcharge tax, it's a worthwhile thing to consider for some people because this year's 24% bracket is the last year's 28% bracket, right? And partially last year's 32% bracket. So keep that in mind. Anyhow, I want to look, and my client's 24%, 22, and then they drop to the 12. And I want to look at that because that tells me a lot. That client is paying more taxes up front, less up back end. The reason they're paying less at the end is they used up their qualified dollars. They made life better for their heirs. They didn't pass on the qualified dollars, but they took a beating up front. Now I'm going to go to my solution. And I'm going to uncheck everything. And you can see we're at the same spot. Now I'm going to tell my client, let's do this. Let's check that. I'm going to take non-qualified first, qualified last. I improved my situation by $41,000. But again, remember, I don't know necessarily because my qualified are being taxed at the back end. I may pay higher taxes here. My client is a New Jersey resident. Their kids are professionals. So we assume that their kids would be even a higher tax bracket, 42%, New Jersey's top bracket, plus the 32 or 35% brackets in the federal. So my client's going to assume a 42% taxation. It could be higher if we turn to the higher brackets. Remember, we were at 40% for the top bracket. And with New Jersey, who knows if you're in California or New York, you know how that goes. You can go up to 10 or 13%. New Jersey's only 7 right now.
Hey, Robert, can I point out too, if you look to the far right, stay where you are, and you look at look to the left where it says total tax, and you look at the baseline, you look at the solution. So to just point out, we did have $29,464 of additional tax, and then go down one more to the total Medicare premiums. We actually must have gotten to a higher tiering at some point. We paid extra $27,319 in Medicare Part B tiering along the way, but we still, after all of that, netted a $41,440 net gain based on these assumptions.
Yeah, but this is not even doing the Roth conversion. All this was doing is something you could always test around with in the application, is whether to take from qualified first or non-qualified. This was saying, what if I take from non-qualified first? Generally, you want to take from qualified. You want this to be the outcome, right? You want to get to the end where you don't hand the kids any qualified dollars because they're going to get stuck. That's really your goal. This was the simplistic way of doing it. I went doing this way, and yeah, I improved the situation, but I'm still handing the kids a crap load of qualified dollars. I want to start converting those dollars. So now I'm going to start doing the converting. And just like before, you're going to notice what happens. I'm going to click the first one. Now it's 51,000. And now I'm going to click again. I'm up to 133. That was a goodie. Now, why did that happen? Well, what happened was I'm improving my Medicare tier situation. I'm going to do that again. Now that hurt my Medicare tier, but I'm now up to 177. But look what's happened now. I have no more qualified dollars going to my heirs. I managed to get those qualified dollars over to the heirs in a more tax efficient manner. Now I'm going to continue doing some Roth conversions. I do that, and that's reducing it. Why? It's 156. I have no more qualified dollars at the end of the day for my kids. I've already done my goal. But as we said before, even though I'm getting diminished returns, 148, 141, I'm getting more and more diminished returns. What I've actually managed to do for myself is get myself in a position of having a large pile of capital free dollars. So even though the first three would have done the conversion that all I needed, I still want to consider doing more, right? Keep that in mind. It's worth understanding that and the concept of that. It also helps so that when if I die prematurely from my spouse, who may now jump into a higher bracket because they're a single spouse, they have a pile of dollars they can live on rather than qualified dollars or taxable investment dollars. So keep that in mind. Those are the things we want to talk about and educate to the client. So you can see that the same rules kind of apply no matter what income level we're at. Now we're going to go and talk about a higher net worth income.
Hey, Robert, before you do that, just imagine if tax rates were to go up and we made the decision where it seems to be diminishing or not as impactful. But if interest rates rise and we've got RMDs for dollars we didn't convert, suddenly we look like a hero. So it's just part of one of those decision points we have to make.
That's exactly right. Because again, even though these are diminishing returns, I'm now taking those dollars and locking them into a 0% tax bracket. I've essentially locked my tax rate on those dollars. Because if these dollars were higher taxed in later years, I'd be in worse shape. Okay. And last case. Now this case is kind of more the most complex of the three. The one that probably you have to do a little bit more thinking about, but in the long run, it's just a logical thing to do. This is a client, fluent client. They have $6 million in qualified, $2 million in non-qualified. Their income needs, actually, let's fix that for 1 second. I just realized I have a slight data entry issue to get there. Yeah, oh yeah, funds shortfalls for qualified. Okay, got that correct. So they need $18,000 a month. That's what is 22? That's $250,000 a year out the gate. They do have Social Security, but it's modest. It doesn't start for a year. They have some other income, and that's about it. Real simple case to look at. But let's talk about what's going on. Let's go back to the uncheck this so you can see without the solution. The first thing I want to look at, again, is their income taxes. This client's taking initially right out of their dollars out of their non-qualified. They're preserving their qualified dollars. They were trying to live cheap, right? That's a mistake, obviously. We want to talk to them about that. But that's what they're doing off the bat. Then we get down to here. We're going to go to the far right, and we're going to look that by doing that, they're keeping themselves cheap on the tax rate for a while. But once RMDs start, you can see that they have 32% bracket. Not a good thing. So what we want to do is talk to the client about what can we do, what we can do about mitigating this issue.
I think it is. The market's down 110 or so right now.
I'm sorry, someone said something?
It's slowing me down.
Hello?
Yeah, it bled there for a couple days.
Okay, so that said, let me now go back to now. I know there's a problem.
It was already announced.
My cash flow too.
It
There's
just
another
doesn't make
issue you have to
sense
look
to
at.
me.
When I look at my cash flow,
I mean, I've not
also
seen
look
anything
here.
damning come out
Here's
of
my income needs, and here's my qualified dollars that I'm taking out.
Josh,
My client has a second problem.
Robert, hold on. Josh, were you trying to chime in?
No.
Josh? Okay, sorry.
So my client needed $20,000 going out the door here per month. They're taking out 25. The reason they're taking out 25 is RMDs. They have excess RMDs. This is pushing them into a higher tax bracket than they need be, and generating income that they don't need. Roth conversion is an ideal way of mitigating this problem. So we're going to go look. Now we're going to go back to my solution. And again, we're going to look at brackets. Now, something really important, this client is already over the $250,000 limit in terms of income taxes. So I want my client, I'm going to go do that Roth conversion. What I'm looking at now is test my Roth conversion. The bracket I'm in, and you can see what I did here. I decided, I already know I'm in the 32% bracket. And I know my kids are going to be 45% bracket now. My kids are very affluent. They're already in the 37% tax bracket. They're already in the top tax bracket on the state. They're up to 35%, 45%, and that number might not come down. So I know paying 32% in taxes is not a bad deal because I know I'm going to be paying it later on anyhow. So I'm Roth converting big chunks of dollars. And I'm taking that hit at 32%. You can almost make the argument to take it at the next bracket at 35%. That becomes debatable. Depends how many dollars you're working with, and you can play with that. You can see, by the way, I get the same. I click on this. I get the same other effect I had before. I'm going to create a higher withdrawal rate up front. For this client, it's not a big deal. You can also see my net worth is substantially less, but that difference again is that I'm sitting on a pile of Roth dollars versus qualified dollars. That's also why you have this lower discretionary number range. That has again to do with the fact of a higher withdrawal rate. At the end of the day, it's $346,000 difference. Now let's go look at one by one again. Okay, I'm going to uncheck everything. And I'm going to start checking things. 111,000. Second shot, 185. I'm going to keep checking them. 344. That was a big improvement. 362. 369. And again, we always will run into that diminishing return. You keep pushing it, and pushing it. And there's a point, there's a diminishing return. But again, we made this argument. We're in the lowest tax brackets we've had in a very long time. Why wouldn't I want to just lock that in? Even if it's going to cost me money on this projection, assuming these numbers, the baseline, is going to keep getting taxed at the current tax rates. It's likely not going to happen. So if that's the case, I'm doing way better. I've reduced the qualified dollars to my kids by $1.2 million. Look what I also did. I reduced my taxes by $300,000, and I dropped my Medicare tier. One of the things you get an advantage is you get higher and higher income brackets. There may be an advantage to getting those Roth dollars gone. If I go now back to my report, and I go to analysis, and now I look at that, I look at that cash flow statement, where before I was having excess RMDs, right here, 20,000 I needed, I'm taking out 25. Here, I'm actually showing I need 23, but I only have to take out 19 from that. I'm not taking my RMDs, and I'm taking a little bit from my non-qualified. Then I drop down to 19 and then 20. So you can see, actually, if we get past that very first year, right here, I'm actually taking out less every year than the baseline. Why? We're both taking from qualified dollars, but I'm pinching a little more from non-qualified. I don't have to do the excess RMDs that you're doing on that basis.
So Robert, so Gary Peavy's asking the question. In this case, did he stay with the initial assumptions, or did you stay with initial assumptions when taking non-qualified first? Did you stay with that?
Yes, everything is the same. There is no changing. They're both taking. What are we taking here? We're both taking non-qualified first. But it doesn't matter here because as soon as on the baseline, it doesn't matter with the baseline because as soon as you get down to here, you're not taking from non-qualifieds because your RMDs are greater than what you need. Me, on the other hand, my RMDs are less than what I need. So I could just fund that, whatever that shortfall is, by some non-qualified dollars. In this case, my RMDs are almost matching my needs exactly. So it doesn't really matter, but at least I don't have excess RMDs. That was kind of the key to doing a Roth conversion with someone with lots of qualified dollars.
So one of the things we talked about in class is RMD compression. You're getting an example of one of the items that we can do to compress. But we also talk about RMD control. And so Roth conversions are one of the ways that we create RMD control as well.
And I'll give you a kind of good methodology when we talk about a lot of cases when you get these higher net worth. If they were fortunate enough to buy life insurance early on and stuff those policies, that's a wonderful way of taking money out now, borrowing from your policy now to pay to convert qualified dollars to Roth, and then use Roth dollars later that are tax-free to come out to refund back to your policy. So kind of different strategies. I didn't, again, want to get into that, but you can see the consequences on the Roth conversion. There's always a diminishing return. You can't just keep doing it, even if the things are favorable to you in terms of tax brackets, because ultimately you're going to force other dollars to fund things. So it's not necessarily perfect to go all the way, but you want to keep doing it until you're at least break even, because you'd rather have a situation of dollars, again, taxed at today's lower rates that you know are for sure, maybe potentially higher rates, which we're not illustrating here in the application. Right?
So, hey, Robert, so in the same way that you could borrow money from a policy, you could do a HELOC or a HECM,
Exactly.
where you pay it back. Same situation, you could use the dollars after the period of 5 years of conversion if they're under 59.5, or not have to wait if they're over 59.5, and eventually use those dollars later to pay back down the HECM loan or the HELOC loan or the life insurance cash values.
And one more composite. What the HELOC does or the life insurance does is, why are we worried about, let's go back to, it's not part of this topic per se, but why do we worry about those higher withdrawal rates? Because we don't want to be selling our equities in down markets, right? So that's what the life insurance or the HELOC will provide us, to give us a revenue if we have to. Listen, I don't care about these high withdrawal rates if it's a good market. I only care about it if it's a bad market. And so if I have those other piles, that's what I want to know that I have them. Either way, it's not going to affect how I resolve that issue. Isn't going to affect that I've improved this position here. Now, I don't get it. It's not just improving the dollars. It's always important to remind the client it's not just the dollars. It's the fact that I can take a $500,000 hit. If I want to help my kids buy, this wealthy person here wants to help their kids buy a nice house, and they want to come up with $400,000 for them to buy that house, or $500,000 have them buy a house, you could do it. You could say, here, I'm giving your inheritance ahead of time. I'll loan it to you, and then you pay, so gift taxes, I'll structure it accordingly. But I give myself the flexibility, because what have I done? If I look on my balance sheet, this is the beauty. What's one last thing? Balance sheet.
Hey, Robert, before you go there, Scott
Yes.
asked, if I'm selling the qualified plan and converting and I keep the equity portion the same, why does the withdrawal rate matter?
Repeat the question.
Scott, can you raise your hand and I'll just give you, just be able to talk. There we go. I'm sorry. There you go. Scott, are you there?
Yes. So on the conversion,
Yes.
obviously the withdrawal rate is not a true withdrawal rate, because I'm taking money out of one pocket and putting it into another. And if the pockets are the same, so if I'm, for example, if the market's low, it's 2009, March of 2009, and I do a Roth conversion, then in my Roth, I have the same portion of equities. I go from a 60-40 to a 60-40. Then
Let me answer.
then the withdrawal rate, it didn't matter that I took it out, because I put it right back in the market in just a different form.
No, except for one thing. Look at this. In the baseline, you're only taking out, here's your tax exposure. In the solution, here's your tax exposure. Your withdrawal rate is higher, and those dollars have to be paid. You have to give up assets to do the Roth conversion. It's not taken from one pocket and putting in the other. A conversion isn't free. There's a cost to the conversion. If I have $100,000 and I'm going to convert them, and when the day is over, I'm going to have 80,000 or 70,000, right? So if I have $70,000, I lost $30,000. If it's a down market, there's $30,000 gone. Where it came from, I take it and pay for it out of my non-qualified pile, which is invested at the same rates and the same proportions. My non-qualified pile is now $30,000 lower because I had to pay the taxes. They had to come from somewhere. And so I now liquidated a higher percentage of my assets to pay it. That's what causes the higher withdrawal rate. And those $30,000 are gone. And if the market is in a down market, those $30,000 growth is never coming back.
So Scott, your comment is correct, except for the drag of the tax.
Yeah, so I get that, and just as a side comment, but if the market's low, that might be the best time to do the Roth conversion, because the growth now will occur in a totally tax-free environment.
Sure.
And if I
No. Going back to this, when you convert those dollars, it doesn't matter if they're here or they're here, because they're going to grow the same rate. This is a larger pile, so its actual dollar amounts growing every year are greater. That is not the case.
Robert, if I'm, except that, I guess the point I think Scott was trying to make is, if I'm lucky enough to pay to convert wherever the boats on the water are at the time the market goes down, to convert it, and then suddenly I get a recovery, and it happens to be in the Roth, I have less conversion costs of the tax if I get lucky enough to make those conversions in the low tide and then grow the dollars on the Roth side and the high tide. That would ultimately allow me to get qualified dollars over time over at less tax cost.
No.
If I were to be lucky to time it that way. And I think that's the point.
I think that's
from a proportion of assets. And if I could borrow from my life insurance policy or my HECM or my HELOC, then I'm not actually losing that.
Well, different equation. If I'm
Yeah,
paying
so
tax
combination.
from a source, now you've got a different equation. If the tax is coming from a different source, such as grandma's lending me the money or coming from my life insurance policy, yes, you're correct.
Okay.
I'm not doing that in my analysis here. My analysis, that's exactly the point why we want to mitigate the withdrawal rate. We mitigate the withdrawal rate with other dollars, such as life insurance or a HELOC. You are 100% correct. But my illustration here, we're paying the taxes out of my pocket, and I'll pay them with non-qualified dollars that are the least tax burden on me. But I'm losing those dollars, which means I'm going to lose them to growth. So, yes, your point is well taken. If you take outside of the model from a source that's not part of your investment pile, you are correct.
Robert, we want to be sure to leave time just briefly for the changes that are happening inside the software and changes that are coming since our last webinar. So we promoted that on our call as well. And we do have one more question here from Eric Rothman. Says, can Robert please share the Roth spreadsheet with us too? So Josh should have all the email addresses. I don't think there's anything proprietary about that. We'd be happy to share that with you. So.
No problem. Not a problem at all. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things that we're going through with the application for people. One of the things that had to do with this Roth conversion was people wanted the Roths to be protected and shielded. So the Roth assets now are considered the last assets to touch. We do not touch those assets unless we run out of money. Second thing, and these are all underlying things in the application, we expanded the number of assets you can, personal property assets you can have, and number of liabilities. So if you're someone who's got 10 rental properties, you have the more flexibility to handle that. The big upgrade we will have is this. Under assets, which we're working on now, it's already done, I'm just waiting for my coders to get complete, is that under assets, we're going to give you what we call other retirement plans. And other retirement plans will allow you to have a qualified bucket or buckets up to 10, where you can identify that bucket to be the first thing liquidated. You can define how much comes out of the bucket on a year-by-year basis. So you could say, I want to withdraw $20,000 a year for the first 5 years. Fine. You can also allow that bucket to liquidate as needed to fund RMDs. So if you have one bucket that you want to be for your RMDs, you can do that. And you can also allow variable contributions. So if you wanted to say that I'm going to, for example, you have a deferred comp, and it's going to be funded with $130,000 a year for the next 5 years, and then from the 6th year to the 10th year, it will liquidate in 5 payments. You will have the ability to do that now. All right.
Robert, can you go to the client info page and show them that we've added the percentage of interest there as well, the inflation there as well? Client info page.
So, we've also added some for identification purposes. There are a little bit of things that you'll see that we've added. There's a lot of small items we've added to help identify things such as, client.
Yeah, it's the tiles I was talking about, not yeah, there it is.
So you can see clearer here the inflation rate. You can see so that when you view this screen, and this one that we're doing in our next class is actually looking at a screen like this and identifying from the screen items that are of important notes. For example, here you can see the inflation rate. You'll be able to see all the summaries, the total money needed the first year of retirement. We're going to go through in our class discussing how you can look at just the screen and define what you need to do in the solution.
And before, you might just remember, before all we had was the inflation factor for the medical on this tile. We didn't have the inflation over for the non-medical flows portion. And so there was a request to add that, and that was just upgraded. So now you see what we're using for non-medical flows, what are we using for medical flows.
Oh, one other thing I didn't discuss. It will be in the next upgrade too as well. We're going to give you, when we do a stress test in the application, I'm going to do a stress test on this client. Well, it's irrelevant to this client per se, but when we run a stress test with the client, one of the things we're going to add to this is the ability for you to either, right now you have several indexes, you can build your own custom index. We'll also let you put a link here that will let you return to no stress test. But we'll let you have another field, whether you do a stress test or not, to adjust the average yield up 50 basis points, 100 basis by 50 basis point increments. So you could increase. So for example, this client's getting 6% average. If you wanted to show, you'll be able to use this field to show the client, let's look at a linear basis. You're getting 6.5%, 7%, 5%, 5.5%. You can sit there and play and show the client, listen, if we do a little bit better on a linear basis, this is what will happen. If we do a little bit better than a bad market by 50 basis points, or a good market, we do really, so you'll be able to adjust, fine tune these numbers on both a stress test and a standard view, so the client can see on a linear basis. Let me get rid of this. Move this out of my way. Oh, come on. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to get rid of that out of the way. You'll be able to show the client, have an option to show them their numbers. So if they open up and look at these numbers, you'll have a tool so you can show them their numbers. What if we adjust this by 50 basis points, 100 basis points, 150 basis points, 200 basis points, up or down? So they can see the impact, because it is substantial. Most people don't realize how just a little bit of change in the market can make a difference in their overall performance. So I figured that would be a kind of an added function and value for the client.
Joel Koenig has a question. Joel, you're live.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Yeah, Joel.
Can the program take into account using charity or other net operating losses so that you can do the Roth conversion and shelter some of the tax, as opposed to taking it out and having
Yes.
to pay?
Yes. So what you can do here is you can go over under here. And again, we weren't going to get into the detail too much of solutions, but yes, you can go down here and make a tax adjustment. So under the tax adjustment, you're allowed to you can make changes in taxable income. So if you're going to make a $50,000 or $200,000 charitable deduction, we're not doing limitations. This will just be adjustment to your overall tax total AGI. So you can make an adjustment to your AGI here, up or down. You can also provide tax credits to yourself effectively.
So remember, we talk about don't waste the basis. Old life policies with a high basis, low cash value. These old UL contracts are blowing up. Guys are either letting them go, because they don't want to pay the big premium. They didn't think they were going to have to pay. Remember, we can recover that basis by 1035ing to an annuity contract. We've talked about that, and we may need a session on that. But you can create a lot of tax credit conversion opportunity for Roth by recovering basis of a life policy to an annuity contract and waiting a year and a day to surrender it, but in a no-load type situation. And policies that we're wasting the basis by surrendering them or 1035 exchanging a $12,000 cash value to a $300,000 premium basis over to the next policy that just gets a step up in basis to the death benefit at death. We're wasting the difference between that 300 grand and that 12,000. We should not be wasting the basis, because that becomes an offset for Roth conversions. So in the same way, a charitable situation or a loss could create a tax credit for a Roth conversion offset. So can not wasting the basis of life policies no longer necessary, even if we're replacing those policies in a different fashion. And then let me just turn you back on, Joel. Did we answer your question, Joel?
Yeah, I'm going to call you back, Curtis. I have a question which you just raised about wasting the basis, but I don't want to take the time now.
Okay, thank you. All right, Robert, I've got a couple more comments, but you want to summarize what you've got left, and then I'll summarize it.
I think I'm at the end of my rope.
Okay. Okay, here's a question from Mike L. Does your software do Monte Carlo simulations? Understand that it does Monte Carlo simulations, but Monte Carlo is not well understood by the client. So what our system allows you to do that's usually not applicable is you can go and pick the particular time. If I say, what if you were to retire in 2000? What if you were retired in 2008? What if you were retired in 1996? It allows you to select a period in the past as though it were to repeat itself today. You can pick any year you want, I think between 1961 or 63 and today. And you can have it start today or the year they're going to retire if it's in the future. And so most people understand a particular period of time repeating that pattern of returns better than they understand Monte Carlo. So we're highlighting to you a feature that's, I think, more powerful for a consumer to understand than traditional Monte Carlo simulations. So the answer, Mike, absolutely yes. All right, so just a quick reminder about Thrive University. I'm going to pull back my screen here for just a second. Just want to, and I'm not sure if I was on at the beginning of the call, but we do have one Thrive U left, Thrive University in Newport Beach, October 23rd, 24th. If you value what you've learned at Thrive University and through our process, you have some referrals you'd like to make, please let us know and invite them to go. They can just go to curtiscloak.com, click on Thrive University and then Newport Beach, and there it is. I also want to remind everybody we're doing next week our Thrive Advanced, first ever Thrive Advanced University training, and it's case design and engineering. No foundational discussions and none of the stuff that we did at traditional Thrive U. We're going to actually take a discovery fact series of 5 or 6 cases, and we're going to actually say, how do we design and engineer, and what are the fact patterns that determine the various tests that we need to do in software, and how do we employ this in software? We haven't yet planned our 2019 schedule, but we do want to do one Thrive Advanced next year. We're sold out for this one, so we can't do any more in this particular class coming up next week. But if you're interested, please reach out and let us know. We're trying to compile a list of advisors, determine where we're going to hold that, and then how big of a room do we need to secure. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you. If you're interested in that Thrive Advanced 3-day session, you have to really have already been to Thrive U and you have to understand the software before we're going to let you come to the class. But for those that are ready for the advanced knowledge, we're going to have a class, just like we're going to do next week. So with that, thanks for everybody being on the call today. I hope this has been helpful. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Our next session will be building a bridge with Social Security delay. Thank you very much.